oil markets were a mess today, thanks in large part to the sad state of journalism in the United States, and a lot of money changed hands based on what may end up being outright false information. What's up, guys? I'm Nobody Special, and with that, we are going to shrink my big melon of a head, and let's take a look at what happened today. First of all, this is the article that started everything in the Wall Street Journal. It came out this morning. OPEC eyes output increase ahead of restrictions on Russian oil. Raising oil production would partially reverse the group's contested decision to cut supplies back in October. Now, oil sold off hard on this news. This is the first mention anywhere of a possible production increase. Keep in mind, it was just back on October 5th that they announced they were decreasing production by 2 million barrels per day. So this article was an outright reversal of that policy, presumably some kind of quid pro quo arrangement. Remember, it was just last week that the Biden administration issued a response to the D.C. court that it was their view that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman had sovereign immunity and therefore couldn't be sued in the United States for the wrongful death of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. So a lot of people bought into this story by selling oil this morning, thinking this was Mohammed bin Salman paying back the Biden administration for making that pesky lawsuit go away for the little murder thing that they did a couple of years ago. And you can see here in this chart, this is WTI crude futures. Oil sold off hard on this news. It was trading around $80 a barrel right before the story broke, and then wham, all the way down. It traded as low as just 75 and change at one point. Now, when I first saw that Wall Street Journal report this morning, my first thought was this does not pass the sniff test. Sure, there was always the quid pro quo thing with the Biden administration there, and that made it at least partially believable. But I just didn't see the benefit here for the Saudis. So I put this out on my Patreon this morning, and I pointed out that this article was anonymously sourced. It was based on something said by delegates, no names attached, just delegates to the Saudi oil minister. Now, unnamed sources used to be considered journalistic faux pas way back when journalists had standards in America, but these days it's common practice to cite anonymous sources or people familiar with the matter. It's a real pet peeve of mine. So you have to be really careful with these anonymously sourced articles, and that's what I mentioned in this Patreon post. I mentioned here, I would also point out that this article is anonymously sourced, which, as you know, is a pet peeve of mine. But I went on to say that much of this story doesn't smell right to me. Maybe it's just the stink of the murder of a journalist being swept under the rug for political reasons, or maybe it's something else. Biden and MBS supposedly had a deal once before back in September, and that didn't age well, much to the president's chagrin. That's in reference to where the Biden administration thought they had a deal with the Saudis where they wouldn't cut production until after the midterm election, something the Saudis went back on. So here I'm pointing out, hey, they had a deal with Biden once before and the Saudis stabbed them in the back, so that could always happen again. But I mentioned here, most of all, I'm struggling with how does Saudi Arabia benefit from this? I just don't see it. I'm not sure having a civil lawsuit against MBS, that's Mohammed bin Salman, in D.C. court tossed out is really enough for the Saudi Crown Prince to tank the price of oil. But I could be wrong. And I went on to say that I had not made any trades yet, but this clearly didn't bode well for my position in XLE. So I didn't make any trades, even though my XLE position was getting killed on this news because it didn't smell right to me. I didn't see the real benefit for the Saudis to do this. The article was anonymously sourced. They've gone back on deals with the Biden administration in the past, and the macroeconomic picture for oil, it just didn't make sense for the Saudis to increase production here. And it wasn't even an hour after I made that post on Patreon that this story broke. The Saudi energy minister denies the output increase discussion, according to the state news agency. Well, now we have actual sources. We have the actual Saudi energy minister, the actual state news agency saying, no, this Wall Street Journal story isn't right. Saudi Arabian energy minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman said the kingdom is not discussing a potential oil output increase with other OPEC oil producers, state news agency SPA reported, denying a Wall Street Journal report earlier on Monday. Now, the article went on to say the current cut of 2 million barrels per day by OPEC Plus continues until the end of 2023. And if there is need to take further measures by reducing production to balance supply and demand, we always remain ready to intervene. So this is a complete 180. Now the Saudis aren't thinking about increasing production. Now they're talking about decreasing production. And as you might have guessed, as soon as that story broke, well, the price of oil, it rebounded to right back where it was, and even a little bit higher, currently trading just over $80 a barrel again. So a lot of people sold off oil futures based on this news out of the Wall Street Journal, only to have the price of oil shoot right back up. A lot of people lost a lot of money on this story. So for me, there were 3 takeaways from this story. Number 1, beware the anonymously sourced article. Papers are constantly putting out stories citing people familiar with the matter or unnamed sources or some guy that I know or my brother's, sister's, cousin's, uncle's, former roommate, whoever. Standards used to matter in journalism, and unfortunately they don't anymore. And this is what happens. You get anonymously sourced articles that take the market one direction, only to have an actually sourced article take the market right back in the other direction. So you have to be careful trading based on anonymously sourced articles. The second takeaway, I'm going to quote my moderator Mish here. He said, when things are happening fast, take your hands off the computer. Whether it's a FOMO rally or a falling knife, when the rest of the world is acting emotionally, that is a time when you need to maintain a pragmatic approach, step back and watch things are happening, get your sense about you, don't participate in a panic. And lastly, you always have to ask yourself, cui bono, who benefits? In any scenario, when you're trying to figure out what's going on, is the story real? Is it fake? Ask yourself who benefits, how, and why. After I initially saw that anonymous source, I started to get very skeptical. Then I saw the price selling off and I took a step back and I asked myself, what is going on here? Why would the Saudis do this? How does MBS benefit from this scenario? And I just couldn't see the benefit for the Saudis here. Having a civil case against MBS thrown out in the DC Circuit Court is just not worth tanking the price of oil by $5. It just isn't. And so I was very skeptical of this story and I didn't take any action based on it. And it wasn't even an hour later that it turned out the story was false. And now, instead of looking at a possible production increase, taking the price of oil lower, we're all faced with the possible reality of another production decrease at the December meeting, something I've been talking about on this channel for a while now. Standards in journalism need to matter. Beware those anonymous sources. Don't participate in a panic and always ask yourself who benefits. Till next time, live small and dream big.